Welcome to my third presentation on the uh, designing of architecture of buildings under the broad theme of ethics in the real estate and hospitality industry. The second presentation was primarily about the designing aspects related to the structure. Uh, this one, in the designing of architecture of the buildings, I'm going to cover primarily the what is the kind of scope for the architecture designs, what are the characteristics, important essential characteristics of a good, robust architecture of the buildings, and what are the important key specifications of the materials which are used in the architecture design, and good design practices for having a good architecture design. What are the stages of designing of the architecture, how to build quality in the designing process using the softwares. Now, in my presentation, primarily it includes the scope of the architecture for the residential buildings, for the commercial, shopping malls, offices, education institutes, hotels, hospitals, factories, and other engineering works. What are the good characteristics of a robust architecture? It must, first of all, must be pretty elegant. It must make use of optimum use of the permitted FAR. It must meet the required specifications prescribed in the NBC or National Building Code, including health and safety. The plans and elevations must be easily visualizable and as per the requirement of the stakeholders. The plumb must be perfect. The changes, if any, are required to be made in the end use of the building. It should be able to accommodate, and it should be able to take care of the any uh, 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 changes in the natural environments in which the building is to be located, and building should be free from leakages, cracks, deformities, bulging of the walls, and other kind of defects, and the all parts must be aligned. Project cost must be optimum, and of course it must be visually appealing. Now, the first component in the designing, while while the designers work on the plan and elevations and other aspects of the building, are what kind of materials are going to be used in the designing. So, for example, it is stones, bricks, structures, steel, etc., etc. Now, let's start with this stones and marbles. Now, designer has to be very clear in specifying clearly what kind of sizes, thicknesses, color, the marbles which are going to be used, which country, polishability, strength, other properties, thickness, etc., etc. For the bricks, designer has to specify clearly what kind of percentage moisture content has to be there, the shape, the sizes, the compression strength, and the density. And in case of structure steel, which is required, for example, for the rolling, etc., railings, etc., designer has to specify the tensile strength, yield strength, elasticity, and hardness, toughness, etc. Then there are aluminium, which is primarily used in the case of facade, etc., or other components. Designer has to specify what kind of grade of aluminum in terms of the strength to weight ratios, air tightness, corrosion resistance, appearances. The glass, for example, for the doors or for the facade, what kind of color, shapes, transparency, brittleness, hardness. Designer has to specify that. In case these are not detailed possible, then one has to specify the particular model and the make which glass is to be produced, kind of ceramics, which means that chinaware, etc., porcelain, etc., what kind of hardness, modulus, elasticity, ductility, wear resistance. There are different standards which are comprehensive enough to include all these details. So, designer has to specify these. The POP, what kind of color, compression strength, coarse particles, setting time. For the paints, what kind of gloss, viscosity, flowability, workability, etc. Although these paints are more covered in the interior designing presentation. Then for the doors, in case these are made out of wood, then what kind of wood is to be used? That is mahogany or teak or white oak or pine or maple, etc. What kind of sizes of the doors, the colors, the luster, the grains, water content, hardness, density, etc., etc. These have to be specified. Now, what are the good design practices in the construction process, which designer has to specify in the case of architecture? First one is starting with the site preparation, how the site is to be prepared, particularly when it is barren land, in terms of clearing the vegetation, the process of demolition, existing trees, protection, how to ensure that, particularly in the strict, stringent environments, how to carry out this earthwork, how to do the brickwork, what kind of punning process to follow, how to do the providing and installation of the woodwork like doors or frames, etc., and installation of the steel railing, etc., etc. The next most important point is that the design must be able to build quality in the designing process itself, so that ultimately the construction which is done follows the quality built in the designing. Now, this requires that the designer makes use of good surface modeling, mesh modeling process, 3D navigations, then what kind of visual styles are there in the architecture, developing of the drawings, developing of the image references, integration of the architecture design which are drawn, aligned to the interior design and the MEP services. Now, there are different kind of software which are used, and AutoCAD is one of the most popular one, which is used by the designers to develop this plans and elevations and designs. Now, how to ensure that the designing process is comprehensive, based on the from various perspectives, the features which are required. For example, how to create and edit the architectural designs, structural engineering designs, MEP views of the coordinated drawings, get the designs and layouts of the project before the construction for general contractors and subcontractors and owners to have a look at these, able to schedule and phase BIM modeling information into the design for the purpose of ensuring that there are no errors and drawing designs are free from any omissions, and cost estimations are done properly, comprehensively, and there is a better comprehensive collaboration among the various different kind of designers. And the system design should be able to the drawings out of the software which is used by these designers, and the it should be able to incorporate the annotations and the notes with various kind of elements which are there. And one of the popular software put to use is Revit architecture, which can be considered or alternate can be considered. Then of course the comprehensiveness must ensure that the designer is able to do the to develop the animations and building flexibility to have different kind of texture options, and generate rendering for marketing, particularly very important in the context of the sale of residential projects. Now there are different, like in structure here also there are different kind of stages for developing a design of the architecture. Now obviously here also the it has to ensure that the design is developed which is robust in terms of statutory and safety requirements, incorporates all the national and international quality standards, optimizes the project cost, and enables efficient delivery of the designs and drawing, which is one of the most severe bottlenecks in the today's context, and and building in the maker checker concept, so that there are no issues of the segregation of duties. Now stage one. In the stage one itself is the developing of the concept designs. Here, as mentioned earlier, I'm not getting into the details of how to do this concept designs, but I'm talking about what are the various precautions to be taken so that there are no issues in terms of developing a robust design. Now here, activities that can adversely impact the business is that skipping or compromising on the important designs and drawing aspects vis-a-vis the statutory code requirements, and compromising on the features like tolerances on the specification of the material workmanship. The statutory codes, the national and international standards are not incorporated. The raw material sizes and specifications are not properly mentioned, and quality requirements and suggested gaugings need to be incorporated, and safety requirements are inbuilt in. And there should be no compromise on the safety of the architecture by proposing low cost or low strength materials and the bill of quantities. Now, other things which can happen in the case of architecture is that can be some kind of a arrangement between the architect and the approving agencies in terms of the issuing of the FR sanction and other compliances vis-a-vis sanction drawings, and not obtaining the necessary inputs for the strategic plans vis-a-vis vision, landscape, traffic circulation, master plans, area plans, preliminary plans, elevations, etc., which can cause lots of problems to the inconvenience to the end users of this building, and not assigning the competent designers or using the same designer to carry out the various stages of this design, and using of the unlicensed software which have got very inadequate features. Now, developing of the schematic design. Now, this includes the preventing those activities where the designs are intents are not aligned to the approved concept designs, and schematic drawings are not comprehensive. The area statements which are there, which are required to be filed, are not completely in terms of the details of each and every part of the project. The cost estimations are based on the ballpark estimates rather than the thumb rules, and detailed assumptions are not stated clearly, and the implementation of this schematic design is done by the same people who have done the concept design, causing problems related to the segregation of the duties. In the stage 3, which is the sanctioning of the drawings, obtaining sanctioning of the drawings, where at times the big organizations, they also outsource this to what is called code consultant. Now, various kind of coordinated drawings are specifications are required to be provided to the approving agencies for the architecture, for the facade, for the landscape, etc., etc. And here, in case the design is not appropriate, then it can lead to a lot of problems related to the incorrect area statements vis-a-vis the intended construction plans, and obtaining these approvals by through unfair means like bribing of these officials. And again, here also the sanction drawing being prepared by the same people who have prepared the schematic design instead of assigning to some code specialist. Now, next one is that revising the detailed drawings based on the sanction approval, because it is not that whatever we have submitted to the approving authorities, they are going to approve that as it is. So these once this approval have come in principle, now detailed drawings, they need to be drawn in the stage 4 in aligned to these sanction drawings. Here there can be some collision of the main architect with the sanctioning authorities in return of some favors. Next stage is the developing of the tenders. Now, tenders in the case of architecture, they include broadly structure and architecture and external development work and facade and landscape. Although in my subsequent presentation I will be covering more in detail about these separately for the external development work, facade and landscape, etc., like I have already covered for the structure. In the tenders for architecture especially, one has to ensure that the specifications and the brand names particularly of the various BOQ material which I have mentioned earlier in the previous slide, they are wide enough to enable offer a good range to the designers and the buyers, the contract team to choose from, to avoid any exchange of these kickbacks in the procurement of these materials. Now, tender drawings, they must incorporate all the necessary quality parameters and quality standards and the inspection requirements for the not only the BOQ but also for the work, fabrication work, construction work which is to be completed. They must be comprehensive enough. Next one is the making of the cost estimates, which is the last but one stage, where now here the project designers, architects, they play a very vital role in terms of projecting the overall cost of the project, which include the cost of the structure, the consumption of materials like bricks, POP, paints, stonework, tiles, door frames, aluminum, glasswork, etc., etc. It has to be done on the first principle basis rather than on thumb rule basis. Then cost of power, project insurance is another very important aspect which needs to be incorporated. Sometimes these architects will give a overall overview of these things, and there are separate teams which are making this doing the budgeting for the entire architecture. But architects, they provide the initial leads for arriving at the likely cost. And the last stage is, of course, the developing of the working drawings and good for construction drawings, which need to be given to the building contractors who are going to erect the building in terms of the civil works. And these must be aligned to the FAR and the building plans and elevations. And there need to be control for providing all this. Now, one has to ensure that the subsequently architects have to play a very vital role in terms of getting the occupation and completion certificate, and one has to ensure that these are obtained through fair means. Now, broadly, there are 25 activities which I have covered in my presentation. More details about this can be seen in my book, in Ethics in Real Estate, chapter 1, and there is a blog specifically on the architecture which you can refer to. Thank you very much.